So in the last video we installed this driveway. It's about 250 feet long, going back to a site where I'm going to build a spec house, a small tiny spec house. So we're back here today to start clearing around where the house is going to go and part of where you're going to park vehicles. So we stopped here. It's about 250 feet. So we're going to start right here and start clearing these trees. Most of these are just pine. So we're going to flop them down that way because there's only small trees over there. But all this stuff I want to clear here, right up to that stone wall, from where I'm standing to the stone wall. And then when we get back here, this tree, that cluster of maple, that pine, and everything to the stone wall. And then back here, this will be behind the house. The house is going to go right here. So this will be behind the house, and this is the southern facing side. So if I was to do a solar system, the sun is going to go like this. So we need all this cleared out. So all this pine here, one lonely hemlock. But for the most part, 95% of this is pine. Then there's a little bit of locust. And a little bit of maple. Most of the trees that we cleared so far were maple. And I don't think there was any pine at all, maybe a little bit of hemlock, but most of it was maple and locust. But back here, it seems to be kind of a different area where it's just nothing but pines. So we don't have a real wide site to work with here. So we got to make the best of it and just clear everything we can. And then I'm not sure if I'm going to bring my dozer over or not. I'm not sure if it's worth it. This is not a huge area. Probably just flatten this out with the skid steer. But then towards the end of the video, we'll start digging for the foundation and see how far we can get, because I don't know if we're going to get down where I want to be, because I'm going to put a full basement in here and there's a lot of rock around here, so we may not be able to put it exactly right here. So I want to find that out before I actually get the engineered plans for this house, because things could change depending on how deep we can get and where we can get that deep. So all this is going to be utilized and used on the sawmill to make up wood that's going to go in this house. So nothing's going to go to waste except for the small stuff and the branches and brush and stuff. Everything else is going to be shipped out of here, milled up and dried up, waiting to be used.
Yeah. Dusty. Nope. That's bedrock right there. It's not a good sign. Yep. This is right where I want to put the house too, so it's not too good. I was like, that's good. Pull back or roll to the side. Good. Do 20 on that one. Do 20. that was the tree that was in the middle of where the house is gonna go. So we got a good little 1/3 of an acre cleared out here. So in just a minute, I'm just gonna take the skid steer with the grapple on it and go through and get all this stuff out. That's gonna be so satisfying. Satisfying to operate the machine doing that, and it's satisfying watching a video about it too. All right, so that's it for today. When we come back tomorrow, I'll organize these piles of logs better. I'm just gonna pile them up against that stone wall there, but I think the first thing to do is move all these, rake out underneath of them, then put them back neater than they are right now. So that's a nice load of logs right there. But now I need to get rid of the logs that are against the stone wall over here, because I want to grade that area and get all the stuff out, like all that debris. So originally I planned on just stacking piles of logs along that wall, but now I'm thinking, let me just put them down here along where the brush is. That way I can clear out that area, and then I can utilize it for like turning around the trailer and turning around the truck and stuff. So I'm just gonna take that pile and put them along that edge right there for now, until I can ship them out of here. All right, here we are the next day. So we are on day 3. But this is the first day that all 3 of us are here. It's been just 2 of us. So I'm hoping to get the rest of the trees down, get all of the logs organized, get all this stuff out of here, grade this out better with the actual bucket, because I got a lot of the debris out. I'm gonna make one more pass. I should bring my rock bucket over because the tines are closer together. I think they're 4 inches apart versus like 8 or 10 inches apart like the grapple is. So it'll get a lot of this smaller stuff out of here, and it'll get some of the rocks out of here too.
Look at the size of that. Look at this.
This thing
Here.
is like 16 feet
Hold the
long.
camera to show the size of it to compared to me, real quick. I'll just stand right there real quick.
That's a pretty big stump.
Wow!
That's like 16 feet long. Hey, look underneath there. There's some animals living there. Here, show a close up of that. Go right up to it. Are those acorns?
Yeah, these are all acorns. Wow. Somebody's stash.
Well, we don't do no 60-day eviction here.
10-second eviction notice. Filled in that whole hole. I think it's lunchtime.
All right, so for the most part, this is ready for the rock bucket and then the grading bucket. I'll do the same thing over there, but right now, while I still have help, I want to drop these 2 pine that are right next to each other, and then that hemlock right there, and then that maple. And then we're gonna probably just take some straps and chains and pull up the good stuff that I'm gonna mill in 16-foot sections, and just leave the rest down there for now. But this hill is not quite a 45-degree angle, but almost. So I don't want to be like going up and down trying to fetch everything down from there, like bringing the excavator all the way down and going up and down with the pieces, or even the skid steer. So we'll just use some straps, some chains, and pull them up. So I'm here on a Saturday, and I decided that I just want to get rid of these logs. Instead of moving them around, because I wanted to at least move them over to there so they're out of the way. You know what? Let's just move them once and get them out of here. I got my dump truck, and I think I can get a lot more logs on that than I can on the trailer. First of all, I can hold twice as much weight. I can hold 20,000 pounds versus 10 or 11, maybe 12,000 pounds on my 14,000 pound trailer. Plus it has sides. So I think it should work out a lot better, get a lot more. So that's a pretty good load of logs right there. I bet that weighs quite a bit with this all being green. What I'm thinking is all the stuff for firewood, which is that pile, and I have a bunch of piles over there. Every time I come and get a load of this, I can chop up 10 or 12 foot pieces of firewood and put it in the back of the truck. And then I'll be maxed out with my total capacity between trailer and truck, which is I think like 60,000 pounds. But I'm not even close to touching the helper springs here, so we definitely have some capacity left in this. All right, so we probably got another 2 loads just right here, and it's preventing me from doing work because the next thing I want to do is come in here with the skid steer, clean up all this remaining debris here, all the organic debris, get rid of that over there. And then I want to start grading this out to get its final grade. So we got a slight pitch. From there to there, it drops about 2 feet. So what I want to do is dig a foot there and put the foot there to level everything out. So rather than waste time going back and forth and having to unload those logs, because I got to use a machine to unload them one at a time at my property, I'd rather not waste that time right now. While I'm here, I'd like to just get all these out of here, grade this out, so that way I can actually back that dump truck, or any vehicle can come in here and go anywhere as they want when I'm done. Because right now it's nice and dry. It's perfect time to grade things out, kind of compact it as I'm going, and then even if it rains, it should be fine in here. So I'm thinking, back to my original plan, let's put these all over there, because I don't see any use for that over there. It's just maybe going to store materials when I'm building, but we're not there yet, so I don't need to store any materials now. I'd like to be able to back in my work trailer, set up some solar panels, have some power, some internet, all my tools in there. That way I don't have to keep bringing my chainsaws back and forth and blah, blah, blah. I just want to have some place to keep things dry. So it'd be nice to just like have like a little parking spot there, have another parking spot for another vehicle, another parking spot for another vehicle. That way we're not always crammed in the driveway with no way to really turn around. So I think it's more important to just forget about these logs, put them over there for now, deal with them later. Let's just move these. I'm thinking the easiest way to do it is with the grapple. Grab one at a time and bring them over there. It's just a lot easier than tracking the excavator back and forth a million times. lots of room to work. Now let's scrape this up with the grapple, get all this organic debris out of here. Most of it's not going to matter because this is probably going to be mostly a lawn here. But I want to try to get out as much as I can. So at this point in time, like I said, I want to move about a foot, maybe 18 inches of dirt from here this way, spread it out to even this out a little bit better. I'm not looking for perfect, but there's no reason to really have a slant to it. And it's not even that much, but at the same time we can grade this out while we're moving dirt. It's a perfect time to do it. So I know people are going to say right off the bat, this is a perfect job for a dozer. Yeah, I agree with you. And there is other times when I could have used a dozer too, but sometimes it's just not worth it. By the time I get that machine loaded up, bring it here, unload it, do this little bit of work, then load it back up and bring it home, it's just not worth it. Yeah, it might make a little bit easier work out of this, but by the time you transport the machine and transport it home, it doesn't pay to do that. Matter of fact, it might even cost you time. So if this lot was 2 or 3 times this big, we were going back that way more, then it might be worth it. And it might even be worth just keeping it here for a while. But for this little bit, it's just not worth it. This is like maybe a half an acre. Let's see, an acre is 208 by 208. And this is probably 250 feet long and then maybe 70 feet wide as an average. It kind of flutes out over there, but I don't know what the math equals out to, but it seems to me like it's a little less than a half an acre. The other thing that I'm dealing with here is that I know I'm going to hit bedrock. Bedrock is going to be probably right at the level that I want to be at. So I'm going to be scraping bedrock, and I know doing that with a dozer is not going to be fun. So we'll just deal with what we got, and we'll definitely make it work. So I think I'm just going to take the excavator over here, just go along this, have the tracks going this way so I can just keep shooting along, just kind of scrape it down. And as I get enough, I'll just swing it over here, keep some loose piles over there, and then I'll take the skid steer and just sort of equal everything out, and everything will look really good when I'm done. Alright, so we are scraping bedrock right here, which is a little bit higher than I wanted to be, but it's not too bad overall. I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper on this side over here. And instead of putting the fill over on this side, I'm gonna use all this to stockpile up, because around this foundation, which is gonna be down there, I need to taper out the dirt a lot better than it is right now. And I need a massive amount of fill to do that. So I have thousands of yards of fill at my house, but every truck full that I don't have to bring is a good amount of time that I don't have to spend doing that. So rather than only taking a little bit out of here and putting it over here, I'm gonna take 2 feet out of here, because that's about what it is. It's about 2 feet to nothing to level this out. So I'm gonna take down the 2 feet here. I'm not gonna add it over there, except for little spots here and there. And then I'm just gonna take the skid steer and grab all this fill and bring it behind me and stockpile it up about where those logs are over there. And if I could gather up a couple hundred yards of fill, then that would really help me out a lot. Because I can only transport about maybe 100 yards a day. And that's a full day and a bunch of diesel. So I've already probably got 100 yards right here, and I can keep going and maybe get another 100 yards, maybe another 200 yards, and that's just 2 or 3 days that I don't have to spend trucking. Or I figured out that if I want to buy that fill, it's about $1,200 per 100 yards. So I've already saved at least $1,200 right here. Let's see how much more we can save. And I know I'm going deep over there, and it's below the stone wall, and I don't know what to do about that. Maybe we'll put a retaining wall in there eventually. I don't know. But I think for now it's fine. It's not going anywhere. It's not like there's a big hill right there, so it's not going to erode. So I think we can just leave it. And you know, whoever buys this property can figure out what they want to do with it. Because I'm not a designer, so I don't know what people want as far as landscaping and stuff. Behind me to get it closer, but it's going to be in my way. Kind of losing a little bit of efficiency by putting it over here. I could put it 40 feet closer, but I just don't have the width here that I need. And I've been scraping bedrock pretty good here. A lot of this is scraped right down to bedrock. I suppose if it humps up here and there, I could always get a hammer. I'm just scraping bedrock right there. I'll tell you guys, I'm really close to getting a hammer, so if we gotta get a hammer to do this, then I guess this would be the project that we gotta get a hammer for. right, so we're almost done moving all that dirt. We got quite the stockpile over there. I don't know if it's going to be enough, but it'll definitely be something towards it. But basically, once I put the foundation in there, I want to bring a lot of that fill around that way and around that way to kind of have like a level area on the side of the house. As level as it can be, I guess, because there's a pretty good drop off right here. But the bottom of the foundation is going to be right about there. So at that point, I want to walk out. So maybe I'll use some fill to kind of make a flat spot just outside the door. And then I'll use the rest to kind of taper that around and then up. If the door is right there, then around the corner from it, I need to start going up with the fill because I need 4 feet of fill over top of the bottom of the footing. So I'm probably gonna have to step the footings right where the door is there. You would usually have to step the footings, but if I hit bedrock, I guess I don't have to step the footings, so I guess we'll see. But my point is, a lot of this fill I want to use around to kind of taper everything. And also, I can bring up the level down here too. Like if I come up with this much of fill down here and like flatten it all around there, then that makes a backyard back here. Because I have room to taper that, because right there it's flat. So what I can do is bring this taper out further, flatten it out, and then the taper can start, because obviously there has to be a taper somewhere. So you know, if the bottom of the foundation is right here and I come out flat and come all the way over to there and then taper out, so right here I could clear this and fill this in. And if I'm up to here with the dirt, well, that's about level with the bottom where I want to be. So then I could actually have, well, I could produce like another like 40 feet by like 70 or 80 feet that way. And that could be like a nice little backyard. I mean, it's obviously not that big, but if it wasn't there, it would be 0 feet. So it's better than nothing. You know, it's kind of stupid because I made this plan, and I guess what I could have done was just started to bring that fill down to the bottom instead of bringing it over here. I don't know. Trying to work and plan stuff out doesn't always exactly work the best. It's not the most efficient sometimes, but you know, sometimes you gotta think about things for a while. And running a machine, kind of mindless operation going on, sometimes you get thoughts that you didn't have when you're actually trying to figure stuff out. You know, you're sitting there in a machine doing nothing and you got a lot of time to think about what you want to do, and sometimes thoughts come up that you didn't think before, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, why did I do that? That was stupid. I could have just brought that fill down and just placed it down there and been done. So I think what we're gonna do right now is push down that tree and this 2 trees right here, and then we're gonna make a path going down that way so that we can start bringing that fill down there, because that allows that skid steer to be running all the time and keeping things moving while I'm on the excavator. Because what I wanted to do was kind of clean up this hill with the excavator, because it's just not efficient to do it with the skid steer. So I want to clean up all this organic debris with the excavator, put it up top, and maybe we can start bringing some fill down. I guess I need to clean that up first before I do that, but yeah, I think that's the plan right now. But first I need to smooth out that area. I just need to take like 15 minutes and just grade that off real quick, and then we'll do that. So like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is grade this out so that this has its kind of tentative final grade for now. So something happened with my camera, wasn't recording, but I got this graded out here. Not too bad. Still got a lot of roots and stuff in here, but I'm gonna wait till it dries up a little bit, and then I can bring the rock bucket through here. Should get a lot of that, and a lot of the rocks that are sitting on the top too. But for now, this is 1,000 times better than what we had before, and it's graded out the way I want it to. You can see where I cut into the bank over there. Some places, like right there, it's almost 3 feet of a cut down to nothing over there,
and down to nothing over there. So we are a little bit lower than the ground over there, which is just perfectly flat. So it's not like there's a bank that's going to be running water down here. But eventually we may need to put some drainage in right here. If we just put a 4-inch corrugated pipe in from there all the way to here and then exit it over the hill there, that would take care of that easily. Just gonna take down those couple trees, clean up this area. And while I'm cleaning up this area, my brother Lucas is gonna be bringing a skid steer down that bank right there, bringing all that fill down to the bottom.
that is so much better. This top area is anyways. This hillside still needs some work, but it's hard to get the skid steer up and down this. This is not an easy thing. So I kind of figured this area right here, we could just leave for now. When I dig the foundation, we'll see exactly where that's gonna go, and we'll see exactly the way I wanna shape it after that, and then we'll kind of address it from there. There's no point in me going up and down this hillside, cleaning it up like 100%, because it's all just going to be dug up anyways or filled over. So maybe I'll take a few minutes and just grab some of this stuff by hand, but other than that, I don't know exactly how it's going to be shaped by the time I'm done. Partly because I need to get into the bedrock there, and without doing that first, it's kind of hard to really determine what I want to do. I need to get a hammer and dig into that area right there, because I'd like to put the basement, let's see, that's the level of the land right there, so I'd like to put the basement, you know, maybe like 12 to 16 inches above that, which means that from here I need to be about 9 feet down to the bottom of the footings. So we're 4 feet, so I need to go down about 5 feet here. And I'm right on the bedrock there, so I'm at least 4 feet into the bedrock. So hopefully it's just like a little triangle area that I need to chip away here with a hammer, and then the rest, the foundation will go down more, it'll step down, and then we'll fill it in with number 2 stone and to bring the level up to the slab once the foundation is poured. So ideally, that pad that I put down there, I would love for that to be about another 6 foot up, and then scattered out to the left, to the right, maybe a little bit further that way. That would definitely be ideal. That would make actually a decent backyard. Like, you could walk out of the basement from the back, maybe take 3 or 4 or 5 steps down, maybe we'll have some steps there, and then that will all be flat. I'd like for it to be right up to the bottom of the basement, but that's just asking for too much. I mean, we're talking another 10 foot of fill there. It's just too much. And part of the reason is not because of the amount of material that I need to put there, but the reason is really that if you were to bring that level out, then you'd have to taper that down way further that way, and way further that way, and way further that way. So the amount that we'd need to add to make it level with the bottom of the walkout basement would just be tens of thousands of yards, and that's just not feasible. So it's better to walk out of the basement, take a few steps down, which you could make decorative, because on the sides of the basement, since it's going to be a walkout basement, it's going to have kind of retaining walls around the side of the basement. So you just sort of continue the retaining wall down a little bit, add some steps, and then inside of those retaining walls you have little garden beds, like flower beds, and it'll look actually really neat back there. And we can always expand that way once I get that monstrosity of all that debris out of there. I would love to bring that up here and burn, but I don't know, I just don't feel safe doing that while I'm not here. I was kind of thinking that once we actually start building, then maybe we could burn a small amount of it every day, and before we leave we can give it some water and put it out, like maybe right in the middle there while we're building. If we're here every day, then we could just burn some in the morning and then just like put it out when we're done. I was thinking I could bring like those 275 gallon totes of water, just stack a couple of them over there, and we could have a little 12 volt pump, or even 120 volt pump, because we'll have power here. And then we can just put that fire out every day, and then that way we can get rid of all that stuff, and then eventually we can take down these trees and fill more that way, kind of expand this way. I don't think we're going to expand that way at all, because that just drops off. That's just a rock cliff over there. So to expand that way, it would be just a lot of work. And honestly, I don't think we really even need to expand that way. But I was thinking maybe that could be like a driveway kind of area. I was kind of thinking that without getting involved in retaining walls, if I could put some like riprap on the slope to prevent erosion, maybe that's good enough. And I could do that along the whole road there too. Just put riprap on the side. You see that a lot with ditches and stuff. So I think it should be fine. I don't think you really need a retaining wall. But going that way, the cliff just drops straight off. So that kind of deserves like a fence there. In case the people that buy this have kids or something, they could pretty much drill right into the rock. Because this is just bare rock right here. They could drill right into the rock for fencing material, like some steel posts, but this just drops right off. So it would take tens of thousands of yards to make this usable here, and I don't think it's really necessary because we still have plenty of land going that way. It does narrow down a little bit here, but we don't need to fit a house here or anything like that, so I don't think it's that bad to be narrow back here. We still got a good 60 to 70 feet, depending on where you are. And it does go back for probably about 200 feet, looking like this. Like there's a stone wall, and there's that edge. This is a good usable backyard. You could use it for homesteading or gardens, or just put a lawn here. Maybe some solar panels. All kinds of uses back here. So I didn't want to disturb that area right there because I think that's where I want the septic. And I think the well is going to go on the other side of the skid steer by that big pine tree right there. Like maybe right next to the driveway. It's got to be 100 feet from the leach field, which is hopefully going to be right here. And the engineers do not want you disturbing the ground for a leach field. So if you want to put in a septic system, don't just tear it up like this, because they might not let you put it in there. I didn't realize that until a couple years ago, and I almost couldn't get the septic approved because I had torn up the ground a little bit. Not as much as this, but you know what? I'm just going to leave it alone, because when you read those septic plans, a lot of them, they want these trees just cut flush with the ground and you leave it there. You're not even supposed to remove the stump. You're not supposed to remove, I think you can remove like the leaves, but they don't want you removing this black soil here. They want that to stay. So this little area, I'm just going to let it stay. It's going to be really hard to get the pitch from there to here if we're going below ground, but it's possible that I can make it work. Otherwise I got to get it pumped, and I think the septic tank's going to sit right over next to the house, and that may have to be pumped from there over to here if it's above ground. Definitely if it's above ground. If it's below ground, I don't know, it's like a 50-50 chance. I might not have enough pitch. So right now I'm kind of looking for engineers. I need plans for the septic and for the house. I think between this property and that property and the one that I got up north, we're going to be pretty busy for quite a while. We'll have some interesting projects. So we could continue this video forever, but I think this is a good place to end it. The next video will hopefully be just coming here and hammering out for the bedrock, digging the foundation, getting it all nice and ready to form up for concrete. And then at that point, we can't do anything else until we get permits. But at least we can get maybe one more video before we get the permits. And I'll probably start that next week. So I hope you guys are ready for this adventure we're going on. And I'll see you in the next video.